Welcome to Voice First TV. I am here with my friend Bret, who just spoke on the main stage at Voice of the Car Summit. And thank you so much for joining me. I have a few questions I want to ask you, but can you please introduce yourself to the audience here at Voice First TV?
Sure. I'm Bret Kinsella, and I am the founder and editor and research director for Voicebot.AI. We like to think of ourselves as the central repository of voice assistant intelligence for the industry. So we gather lots of data. We report every day. We've got podcasts. We've got research reports. You can go to voicebot.ai/research and download. And so really our goal is to educate the industry about what matters.
Okay. Why is there so much energy around voice first, voice tech? Why are people so interested in Alexa and Assistant, in your opinion? Why has there been this massive shift in the recent seasons?
Well, I think it's probably not different from what you'll hear a lot of other people say, is that it's the way we naturally communicate.
Right.
It is the first time, actually, that technology understands us in our natural communication mode. Right. So some people might talk about the Gutenberg parenthesis, but this idea that we had an oral tradition for many years, we went through 600 years of text, and now we can talk again, and the devices around us can understand it. So this is really the first time we haven't had to learn the language of the technology to interact with technology.
Right.
And it's just convenient. And we know that the trend around technology over the last decade, 15 years, is all towards convenience. And there's really nothing more convenient than just saying something and having it happen.
Right. You do a lot of research. And so was that something that you'd always done? You transitioned more toward voice, or has your desire to research, publish content, let people know about what's happening in the industry, has that increased because of your involvement in voice tech?
I've always done a lot of research. I'm kind of an empiricist by nature, and so I like to look in particular at what consumers are doing. So I spent time in the 90s around the rise of the web, 10 years later around mobile and then social, and now in voice. And the first thing I looked at with voice, because I was analyzing the industry, I wanted to see what consumers were doing. Because there's a lot of things out there that are hyped in Silicon Valley. AR, VR come to mind, but are really slow to take off. Or RFID, which I worked in years ago. And the key thing you need to look at is, what are consumers doing? Are people adopting it? And when you see that happening, then you know you've got something. And so I was looking for that consumer adoption. I didn't think that the data out there was very good. So I said, okay, I'm just going to have to get it myself. I gathered that information, and then we're able to analyze it and really shed some light on this space.
Yes. What would you like to see in terms of content accessibility through a video network like a Voice First TV? Like, what would your hope be that Voice First TV is in a few months or in the next several years? Like, what type of environment would you like people to be able to absorb video type content? Just basically all your talks, just back to back?
Well, maybe. I mean,
you've done a lot of talks, so there's a lot of content there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you're doing this. And we think about what came out first around voice was a lot of podcasts.
Right.
And then we have these microcasts like Lingo does, right? So you can do these 1 minute podcasts, and then we've got longer form podcasts like Voicebot podcast, which is an hour. And that makes a lot of sense because we're talking about voice, and it's an audio first medium, and so we're doing that. But let's face it, we're a visual species. That's right. And video is driving a lot of activity. And so I think it's great what you're doing, because what I want to see is, I want to see the market educated. I want to see the people who are the suppliers of the technology or the suppliers of the experiences, like brands and media. I want them to understand what's going on and how to do it right. And then I want consumers to understand what's out there, what can they do, because so few people actually know what you can do with the technology. In fact, you see it in the data. Most of the usage on smart speakers is actually first-party services. So just what Alexa or Google Assistant can do. It's not actually all these third-party experiences, the games, the media programming, the other productivity utilities and those types of things. And so we need to raise awareness that that's a thing that people can do.
Right. What are you most surprised by in the voice technology space that you had not anticipated? And what are you anticipating and you're like, how are we not there yet? Like, what are some surprises, both delighted by and maybe frustrated by, in this space right now?
Well, I think the first thing is the rapid adoption of smart speakers. And smart speakers are really important because what they did is they proved that people wanted this in a certain setting. And then they also started to train people to want to use voice on these other surfaces. So we're here talking at Voice of the Car Summit, right? A lot of people don't know that voice has been in the car since 2001. That was 13 years before the first smart speaker.
It's amazing.
Right? 15 years before Google Home came out, right? And so if you think about this idea that we have voice in these other areas, and we've had it since 2011 on smartphones, that why weren't people using it more there? The use cases were very circumscribed by the people who were rolling them out, sort of the auto brands or the handset makers. And so people didn't know you could do more. Once they got a smart speaker in the home and they realized all the things they could do, it's been really amazing. And so then that is now driving people to use voice more on these other surfaces, so smartphones and cars. And I think that's really one of the most interesting things. Now, your second question was, what am I not happy about or disappointed about? I would expect to move faster. I think one of the things that really needs to move faster is for these voice experiences to connect to each other. And that's true even within a platform. So right now you can ask Alexa to do something, or you can ask Alexa to call up a third-party skill to do something. But two third-party skills can't work together. And we really need that in this space because no one's going to be able to build a completely end-to-end experience in voice for everything a consumer would want to do, because these are unbounded interactions. We don't tell them, hey, these are the 5 buttons you can push. And so I think that's one of the things that really needs to move forward. And that's true in Google Assistant, and it'll be true in Bixby. All these platforms need to move that direction.
Talk about the future of voice, like as far as you're willing to go, when maybe there's no device. When there's a time when it's not device-centric, maybe we don't have cell phones or remote control of our life today, maybe we don't have a smart speaker, but it's just integrated into our cars, into our homes, our offices, and I would like to think that technology might understand us better than a human, and we might understand it better than a human. At that pivot point, like 2 billion people that can't read and write, they can communicate with tech, like that kind of future. When you think about that, what type of things come to mind, and what do you get excited about as you project 5 or 55 years out?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that voice is a technology which is device independent, and that leads to a lot of different downstream ramifications. So the first is, if you think about the web, we started with PCs, and then we went to smartphones, and we had that handset, and that defined our experience with the app ecosystem. When you move to voice, it's not about the smart speaker. It's not just about the car. It's not just about appliances or hearables, headphones, all these different things. It's everything. And so we have this interface that's not only natural for us, but it's device independent. And that's the thing I think is going to be most interesting. So I think you picked up your smartphone. I think we're going to be less dependent on those. They're going to get smaller. Once again, I can't wait for that. But the other thing is we have a set of screens behind us.
We do.
Increasingly, there are screens all around us. And so when we think about all those screens, we don't necessarily need this little screen. We'll be able to interact with these other screens. And voice will be the tool that'll help us jump between surfaces and have this common, consistent, and continuous experience that's not device dependent.
It's good. Any final thoughts before we wrap up our interview?
Well, I would just say that if we think about what we're talking about here today, a lot of people don't know that there's about 60% more monthly active users of voice in the car is on smart speakers. Because a lot of people have cars, they've been around for a lot longer, And so I always want to point that out to people. And there's even more people using voice on mobile. And so there's this focus on the smart speaker, and people should do that. But we should also be looking at all these other contexts that people are going to use these in. And is people who are maybe building experiences to ride on these platforms, they should do that. And the last thing I'll say is that I do expect there to be thousands of branded, customized voice assistants. We might have 4 or 5 of these big players today, but if you think about things that Mercedes and BMW and Bank of America and Capital One are all doing, they're creating their own voice assistants, and there are going to be thousands of those because all these brands are going to want to think about how they can have a customized experience, they can own the customer relationship, they can control the data, and they're not just going to rely on Amazon, Google, Facebook, or somebody else to provide it for them. They're going to maybe work with them, but they're going to have their own experience as well. So I expect there to be an explosion of voice assistants, and they're going to be very specific and differentiated.
Now, people can find you at Voicebot.AI. Is there any other place like Twitter or LinkedIn that you would encourage people to connect with you at?
So first and foremost, Voicebot.ai. Pretty simple to write that out. And then at Bret Kinsella, or at Voicebot.ai on Twitter are probably the easiest places to find us.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Thank you for your attention. We honor your attention. We're grateful for it. Here comes the Google Pocket Disc right at you.